engagement there.
You're listening to Head South Radio with your host, Kat Meyer, a podcast dedicated to prioritizing pleasure and removing the stigma and shame around sex. We're here to be curious and have an open conversation about sexual health and relational wellness. This podcast is intended for educational and entertainment purposes. The information discussed is not a substitute for professional medical advice.
Hey, I'm your host, Kat Meyer, and today's episode is part 2 of our Best of series. So if you haven't listened to part 1, you should definitely give that a listen. We hope you enjoy this episode. Please leave a review on whichever platform you find yourself listening to Head South Radio. Your support helps us grow. During my interview with Valentin, there were so many men in my life who were coming to mind who I felt would benefit from listening to this episode. There is something confident and vulnerable about the way Valentin speaks. I feel like more men want that for themselves. A quiet confidence, an ability to express their entire range of their emotions and connect deeply with their intimate relationships without feeling the societal pressures of masculinity. Speaking of conversations, how do you approach conversations with your clients about consent? Because when we talked prior to this, you mentioned that that's a big part of some of your work is consent. And so what does that look like? How does that frame educating people on consent?
Yeah. So first, I try to really expand a tiny bit what they think consent might be. And I think a lot of people, and me included before I got into that work, kind of tend to equate consent with permission. But consent is much wider than that. Permission is a small part of consent. Consent is really the active process through which we make sure that everybody involved is constantly within their desires and boundaries. And I think already framing it as that is already showing you it's very often not clear-cut, not a super clear yes or no, which then means that we actually have to engage even more in checking in and in making sure that everybody is there. Mm-hmm. I think that grayness is an encouragement for more active engagement. So the first thing that I talk about, and the second thing I really try to drive home with everybody I talk to around this point, I truly believe that it's the responsibility of the people with more power. So that can be because of gender, social status, money, whatever else is at play in that particular relationship, to do the extra legwork and like make sure that consent is that everybody is able to consent fully and freely. So a little bit of like theoretical education on those things, and let me know if it's not clear.
Yeah, no. From what I'm understanding, it's no matter what a relationship is, there's always a dynamic, and so it could be a gender dynamic, age dynamic, power dynamic. One partner is working, the other is unemployed. There's so many different dynamics that develop, even just between familial, parent, child, and consent and boundaries are important across all relationships. And so that's what I'm understanding. So is that clear? Like it's depending on the dynamic, you might encourage the person who might be more in the position of power.
Be the one checking in more often, for instance.
Yeah.
Not expecting the one to say no if they don't like it. Going, hey, do you feel like that? Whether that's in bed or in a wider dynamic in your life or things like that.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing I talk about, to try to get them wrap their idea around what that is. Right? And then the other thing I try to explain people, and cis men to people, and cis men tend to really integrate that really, really fast often. I'm convinced that specifically around sexuality now, I'm convinced that the reason why so many people might think consent ruined the mood, independently of their gender or sexual orientation, is just because they don't have models of how it can be practiced. And I think consent is as much a part of the game of seduction as how good a dancer you are or whether you give good massage. And so specifically now around cis men clients who are actively dating or looking for partners, again, usually that really drives home really fast.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, I can do that. And that solves all of those tensions that I had around I don't know how to initiate and still I care about consent and I want to do that well. And you're telling me I can do both and everybody's going to love it.
Yeah.
Usually it's like, okay, cool. I'm going to learn how to do that now.
Yeah. I can speak for myself and a lot of women I know who appreciate that level of consent. Consent is the form of conversation. It's not necessarily like, I have this NDA, I have some paperwork for you to sign before we initiate sex here. It's as simple sometimes as like, what feels good? Just like you would say, I made you this pie. Does this taste good? And getting the, like, do you want pie? And the person says yes or no. They eat the pie. Do you like the pie? Is a continuation of that consent.
Exactly.
And then adding other things. Hey, you don't give them ice cream. All of a sudden you say, do you want ice cream? They might say yes to pie. They might not want the ice cream.
Can I share one tip that I give you? So one thing I really like is when you make a request, inviting the person making the request to separate the expression of their desire from the question. And then when there's a question, ask an open question. So how does this sound like? Instead of saying, you like the pie? Do you want ice cream? I could say, hey, I saw that you like the pie. I also really want to give you ice cream. How do you feel about that?
Oh, I like that. I like the how do you feel about it too.
And so this is so cool for so many reasons, because first, on the safety side, like, and really having a built-in check-in. If I ask you, do you want ice cream? Right? You have this direct versus indirect communication problem. You're like, are you asking me? Is he really asking me if I want ice cream? Is he saying he wants to give me ice cream? Like, there's just so much loaded in that question.
Is this a trick question? Should I not have ice cream?
Yeah, like there's just a lot there, right? And instead, if I'm very clear, hey, I want to give you an ice cream. How do you feel about that, right? So then it's very, very clear. And also going back to leading and acting first and things like that, stating the desire point blank is as bold a move as doing it right away, which used to be kind of the norm. Has a lot of problem built in around those power imbalances, especially, right? Because it's hard to say no if I were to just try to give you ice cream without saying anything.
Right.
But if I just say, hey, I really want to give you ice cream, that just keeps that same polarity and dynamic that some people really like, but giving you more space to maybe say no. And then instead of asking a yes-no question, which same can have a little bit of absolute in it, right? Because it's like, well, I don't want to offend him, so I don't want to say no, but...
Yeah, or you're just not sure yet.
Not sure yet. By asking you, how do you feel about it? So an open question that invites you to tune inside. And if you really want ice cream, it's actually going to be really hard because you're going to tune in to how much you really crave ice cream right now.
Yeah.
Right? And so you're just going to say, you might be like, ooh, yeah.
I want ice cream.
Yeah.
Or you're like, maybe in a little bit, but let's have more pie.
Yeah.
Our content creator Ice's favorite episode was DBs. For starters, I was really interested in this topic. I was exposed to porn at an incredibly young age, but never really thought about how that affected me. This is one of the episodes that flew by for me, and when it ended, I wish I had more. I really enjoyed listening to DB. I'd been following DB on TikTok for quite some time and was surprised at how different her personality was. Her TikTok energy is very high, whereas on the podcast, she was a lot more grounded and serious. She was very knowledgeable, and I found myself multiple times pausing the episode to share with the people around me what I had just heard. When the episode was finished, my head was filled with so many questions, and it made me want to do my own research. Speaking of ethical porn.
Yeah.
What differentiates ethical porn from non-ethical porn? What are people looking for when they're out there searching the internet when it comes to ethical porn?
So ethical porn, essentially, like the name suggests, is ethically produced content. And the reason why it's labeled ethically is because the production is held to a certain set of standards or ethics that are determined by the people who run the company, the producers of the content, and the performers. So when we're really breaking that down, we think about the fact that ethical porn pays its performers fairly. Ethical porn has conversations between the producers, the owners, and the performers about the kinds of scenes that they're going to do, about the way in which that they engage in front of the camera and before the shot and after the shot. Ethical porn uses different kinds of bodies and different kinds of stories and is diverse and ensures that people have a say in the way in which that their stories get told. It's created in an environment that's ethical and transparent. There are so many different things that ethical porn can fall under, but the best way to know if a porn site is ethical is by chatting with performers and asking them, how does it feel to work for this company? Or what was your experience doing work for this organization? What did it feel like to do a scene with this person here? And so, sex workers are the experts in their own experience and in their profession. They are professionals who do this work in this field and know a lot more than, an educator kind of being the middleman. So definitely would encourage you out there to check out some sex workers. We've had a couple on Sex Ed with DB. So if you check out our podcast, you can scroll through and learn a little bit more. One great conversation we had was with an adult film star and sex worker named Mia Little, if you want to check out her name. And so when we're thinking about ethical porn sites, right, I already named Dipsy. I named Make Love Not Porn. I already named Erica Lust. There's also Crash Pad series that is specifically focused in LGBTQ plus and kinky ethical porn. And so there are a lot of these kinds of sites out there. It's really interesting because I did a TikTok on ethical porn almost a year ago now, and it blew up. It has like 650,000 views or something like that. And we get so many comments on it that come from people with these kinds of responses of like, well, if I have to pay for it, then I'm not going to pay for it. And if you're one of those people out there who are thinking like, well, I can just get my porn for free, why would I pay for it? First of all, like, do you pay, or does someone in your family or friends pay for Netflix and Hulu and Apple TV and all of these other streaming services you use? Like, yes, people have to pay for their entertainment. If you think about people who are performing in ethical porn, it is entertainment. I mean, it is no different. We should be supporting people to get paid a fair wage and to make sure that we are not adding to the problem of, exploiting people for their work and for their expertise and for their value.
Mm-hmm.
Other kinds of comments that we get are along the lines of, well, my porn is definitely not ethical and I don't care. Like, people aren't afraid to say, I really don't give a shit that this isn't ethical. And that's kind of the end of it. And if you're somebody who is like that or knows someone like that, I really encourage you to consider why you don't care about other people's livelihood and why you don't care about the way in which folks' human rights are being denied if we're not consuming porn ethically. So yeah, it's just a really interesting thing. I think like it's a newer topic, but I'm hoping that with more conversation, with more education, it's changing.
Absolutely. I'm going to liken it to farming and what we consume. And if you think about like going to a major mass produced grocery store and like trying to shop for things, but then also going to a farmer's market and meeting the farmers who are picking those vegetables and being able to have a conversation about the eggplant or the spinach, and then knowing fully like, yeah, these are organic. We didn't use a till. Like, all of that information is the same as like engaging with a sex worker and asking them the questions. And I think that there are people who are like, I don't care, I'm going to eat blah, blah, blah. Fair enough. But I love that you're posing the question of like, well, think about why you feel that way. Like, let's just kind of, if I just implore you to, explore that within yourself. Like, why do you not care? Like, you don't have to care as much as everybody else all the time, but like, just think about why and why do you feel the need to like argue it or be like, this is my stance. But what is that stance? What are you standing for?
Mm-hmm. Totally. And I also want to name OnlyFans, right? Because I do think platforms like OnlyFans have really changed the game for the way in which that creators and sex workers are able to run their own businesses, because they're in charge, right? Like, theoretically, folks who create OnlyFans pages are making their own content, they're making their own prices, and they are able to decide the way in which they want to engage with their audience. Whereas sex workers who work in like kind of these larger male-driven porn companies like don't necessarily get all of the same liberties. And so if you're someone who would consider subscribing to someone on OnlyFans, or think about it this way, in a not sex worker way, I'm someone who really loves watching ASMR videos. And like, you know, I've tipped my like favorite ASM artist because they're providing an entertainment service for me.
Mm-hmm.
So like, why would we not think of sex workers in the same way?
It's a very important question. I also think the safety and human rights component that people don't actually think about. And I remember I was interviewing a sex worker, Savannah, and she used the reference of like, sex workers are oftentimes the canaries in the mine and are alerting us to the bigger issues. Like, you might not think it matters now, but I assure you that like 3-5 years down the road, you're going to see where these things and where these liberties and rights and support for these groups of people, marginalized people, including sex workers, are then bleeding out into the mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
Then you're scared and then you're worried and then now you care. But if you're not thinking about it now, down the road, it's going to implode. It's going to become a problem. I want to point out too that the ACLU is doing amazing things with sex workers' rights, including like, I believe it was MasterCard had shut down, like they weren't allowing certain sex workers to collect money and kind of prohibiting things. And this is a bigger conversation and probably a whole nother, it's definitely multiple episodes of sex workers' rights and then sex trafficking and the differentiation between those two. And I did speak to Savannah in the previous episode about that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of within that realm of like validating and protecting sex workers. Like if you're enjoying it, to your point, like ASMR, going to a museum and seeing an artist's work, going to a concert, you know, you're paying for that ticket.
Right.
And so why is this devalued in comparison? ISIS also chose Mint's episode. It was such an interesting topic. Living in America, I don't really know what other countries or cultures teach when it comes to sex ed or their values or views. I found this episode eye-opening and empowering. She's so passionate, down to earth, knowledgeable, and Mint truly just makes you want to listen to her for days. I cried, I laughed, I paused, I shared.
I have seen so many patterns, you know, and I think I am the first to witness them in the region.
Mm-hmm.
There has been a lot of patterns that I stumbled upon when I talk amongst my peers who work in different areas of the world. There are definitely some specific things that are common on our side of the world. The one thing that I noticed is a little bit different in my practice in comparison to other somatic sexologists around the world is the following. It's the fact that in the Middle East, there's a very heavy price tag on virginity, but there's an even heavier price tag on virginity than in other places of the world because of the following, because of the idea of keeping the hymen intact. So around the world, there are people whose definition of virginity is do not have sex or, you know, haven't had sex or do not have sex before marriage. Yeah.
Yeah. No penetrative sex.
Thank you so
marriage.
much.
Yeah.
Thank you for calling. Yeah. For calling that out. Yes. Intercourse. Yes. So penetration before marriage. However, in the Middle East, it's don't put your finger there. Don't put your finger near there. Nobody's finger goes there. Don't use tampons. Don't use menstrual cups. For some more conservative or extremist families, it will also look like don't ride bikes, don't ride horses.
Girls are told from when they're super, super young that they shouldn't touch the area of their body, their vulva. So what happens is, you know, as young as toddlers, when they're, you know, getting a diaper, nappy change, and they place their hands, you know, that's what happens. As a toddler, you want to explore your whole body. So they'll place their hands, the girls will place their hands between their legs, just exploring while they're having a nappy change. And the mom will automatically say, no. Don't touch here. Don't touch here. Touching here is dangerous. If you touch here, we will know. Don't touch here. And so what happens when they're told that is that they learn that a part of their body is unsafe, that a part of their body is a place that they should be scared of, and that this part of their body is a space that they should disconnect from. And we actually call it the genital hole. We call it the genital hole. Like it's an actual thing. You can Google it. When someone is not able to sense a certain part of their body because they've been conditioned to disconnect from it. Oh. Because what happens as a child, as you're growing and developing, what happens is that the neurons that run from your brain to certain parts of your body connect and get stronger and stronger and stronger over time. That's why younger children aren't able, for example, to open water bottles or a bag of crisps. But as they get older, their neurons, because they're allowed to practice connecting their brain to their fingers in this situation, let's say.
Right.
And then as they practice that, they're able to control that a little bit more.
Yeah.
Or, with brushing your hair, when you're younger, your ponytails look a little bit wonky, but as you practice more, they're kind of more pristine and in the right place. And that's just because of the fact that you get to connect your neurons to these parts of your body. Now, if you're not able to touch your own body, and if you have a fear of touching your own body, then your development completely changes. And this is before the girls even have awareness of any sexual feelings, let alone love, in a romantic sense. And so that was the thing that I picked up in my first year of work. I was like, wow, there's an extra part that I'm doing here that I haven't been trained to do. And that's when I picked it up. What I picked up was that so many women post-marriage were having their first penetrative experience with the first thing that goes inside is somebody else's penis. It's not their finger. It's not the other person's finger. But the first time that anything goes to a place that you feel is foreign, have been told is super dangerous, have been told is not a place you should touch ever. There you are on the first, on the night of your wedding day, legs open, inviting someone else to do that first. And I just want to put a very tangible comparison here, a comparison that everybody listening here can access. Okay. So you remember COVID and PCR tests, right? And how uncomfortable was it someone sticking a stick up our noses? That was really uncomfortable for so many people. I mean, I had to be held down so that I could have someone stick a stick up my nose. And the thing is that whilst that's the case, in this scenario, almost 100% of the people getting PCR tests have stuck their finger up their nose one way or another. And if they say no, they're just lying about it. Everybody has put their finger in their nose at one point in their life and probably still continues to do so, right?
Yeah.
So you're super familiar about your nose. You know how deep it feels. You know what it's like. You have stuck your finger up there. And even though that's the case, there you are in this vulnerable moment where someone is sticking a PCR test up your nose and you feel really unwell.
Yeah.
Now, let's take that as a complete parallel to vaginal penetration. And so while there are so many emotional consequences that come here, the thing that stood out to me the most was the following. I am the practitioner with the highest vaginismus and pain with penetration cases between all of my colleagues, between all of them. And the reason is because especially when it comes to the female genital anatomy, any pain there is 50% psychological and 50% physical. What I have come to understand is that it is actually really beautiful that that's the case. It's really beautiful that that's the case because your body is not working against you. When you have pain with penetration or when you experience vaginismus, where your muscles are too tight for you to be able to relax to experience penetration, that's a very beautiful message from your body telling you, this is not the time. We are not ready.
It's protecting you.
Yes, it's protecting you. It's a beautiful thing. But then even the treatment that is available I don't know about the rest of the world, but I definitely know in the region, the treatment that's available for that is Botox, the equivalent of Botox, which is numbing those muscles periodically. So you're basically numbing them so that you can just take it, essentially, stretch the muscle and just take it, which is the complete opposite of pleasure and completely ignores the psychological aspects and reinforces the idea of pain in the long run when the Botox wears off and you do start feeling the pain again, right? And then the other thing is that psychologically, you have this disconnect. You're like, I really love my partner. It's always the line that I get. It's always, I really, really love my partner. I just think I have a low desire. I just think that I have low desire and I'm not really interested in having sex. Or I really, really love my partner. I can't believe we went on our honeymoon and we weren't able to consummate the marriage, which is essentially penetration, right? And the first question I ask when someone tells me, I think I just have low desire, the first question I ask is 0 to 10, 0 being nothing terrible, not great, 10 being mind-blowing, my dream sex life. How great is the quality of the sex you're having?
Yeah.
Why would you crave not so great sex again? And love does not equal incredible sex.
Right.
To experience incredible sex, that needs to be figured out. And it takes time, especially with new partners. And especially if you haven't explored yourself.
Mariah's episode is an honorable mention in our best of, because quite a few of us love this episode. Isis wrote, she is so passionate, fun, funny, and cute. I found her episode to be a great opener to the season. It brought a different energy compared to season 1. A lot more approachable, relaxed, and still educational. I love her TikToks, the Sex Ed Files, so I was just really excited for her episode. I enjoy listening to the questions the kids ask, so interested and funny and curious. While listening to her episode, I found myself looking back on my own teenage years and realizing not much has changed or improved in sex education, which left me very concerned for kids these days.
What is the difference between abstinence education and comprehensive? Because there's not many states that actually mandate it. It might be available in certain states, but across the board in this country, in the United States, it's not the same curriculum and it varies widely. If you can just explain the difference between, we get abstinence education, but what is comprehensive?
Yeah, comprehensive, it's like the approach that kind of acknowledges that sexual development, like having a body and going through life, is just a normal and natural part of human development. It's just a natural part of life. And so what are the tools someone would need in order to get through life, understanding, like coming to a place where they understand who they are and know how to function with the body they have and are given, or, what choices they want to make with that body. So comprehensive sex ed is more of like a holistic approach that touches on the emotional and social aspects of growing up, of dealing with life. It's not just the, where does a penis go? And here's how you stop pregnancy. Those are parts of comprehensive sex ed, but it's not the only part. So it's a more holistic approach to learning about life. It's life skills. It's learning how to communicate. It's learning how to just navigate the world. I mean, that's kind of how I see it. I know there's like a more clinical definition of this is comprehensive sex ed, but I think just kind of like in my own words or perspective, it's really just acknowledging all the different parts that make us who we are, all the different parts of human sexuality, which include your gender identity, your orientation, your ability to be safe or have safer sex, your ability to make choices regarding your own reproductive and sexual health. That's comprehensive sex ed. I wish more people kind of saw, especially the people who are very much against comprehensive sex ed, kind of saw the need for it and how beneficial it can be even for like adults and guardians and parents of kids who are maybe receiving this type of education, because it isn't just something that's supposed to happen in school for 2 hours throughout the entire year. It's continuous.
Special thanks to all of our guests. Head South is hosted by Kat Meyer, produced by Isis Barlow, edited by Megan Hook, with music by Lily Rezi Rothman, graphics by Ella Chodos Irvine, cover art by Gina Ship Casey, and intro by Murph Meyer.
If you're looking for me